Okay, so it's 4 o'clock, so we're gonna get started now. So thank you everyone and welcome to the first annual NSLI Indonesian Alumni Q&A and presentation. So it's gonna start off, we have a slideshow that we prepared for you and we're just gonna go through that. And then we're going to go on to the Q&A section. So feel free to type questions in the Q&A or the chat section and we'll answer them after we do the slideshow. So yeah, do we each want to introduce ourselves first? Okay, so my name's Aurelia Vandal and I'm from Spokane Valley, Washington. I'm a junior at Ferris High School and I was on the NSLI Indonesia program in Jakarta this past summer.
My name's Sam. I'm a freshman at Dartmouth College, and I was also on the NSLI-Y Indonesia summer program this past summer.
So I'm Mina. I go to college at Northeastern University in Boston. I'm a freshman, also on the NSLI Indonesia summer program in Jakarta.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan. I'm a sophomore at the Procurement School, and I participated in last summer's NSLI-Y Indonesia program as
well. Okay, can we move the slide to, okay. So NSLI is a Department of State program that fosters international cooperation among youth for the 8 critical languages.
So basically, NSLI is an intensive language learning experience, and that means that it's based on immersion. They try to, in a summer, have the equivalent of a year's worth of language instruction, and over the academic year, 3 years worth. And basically, this is a full merit-based scholarship that the State Department provides in order to allow students that wouldn't be learning certain target languages in American public high schools to learn those languages in the hopes that eventually when it comes to global cultural understanding, as well as just global cooperation in general, people, especially Americans and foreign people, will be able to cooperate better. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. Cool. So obviously we all did the Indonesia program over the summer, and just an overview of Indonesia and some important facts to know about it. Its population is 261.1 million, which puts it at 4th largest in the world. And its capital is Jakarta. That's actually the city where the 4 of us stayed during the summer. In addition to being the 4th largest country in the world by population, Jakarta is actually the 2nd largest city if you go by metropolitan area. It's got approximately 300 million people. And what's interesting about the country of Indonesia is that it's actually a bunch of islands that are sort of conglomerated into one nation. It allows for a lot of diversity in culture, and we'll go into that. But it's actually made up of around 17,500 islands. In addition, and there's the 7 big ones, but there's a lot of little islands that are all part of Indonesia as a whole. In addition to that, religiously, its Muslim population at approximately 225 million is the largest in the world, and that does have some effect on the culture there and the way people act. I don't think it's anything that changes necessarily the way people treat each other or would treat non-Muslims, but we'll go into that as well. And with regards to climate, the equator actually cuts Indonesia in half. So it's tropical, and I think 96% of the country is considered to be in a tropical biome. Yeah. So we can go to the next slide. Cool. So as far as cultural values go, and this is super important for anybody who's interested in going to Indonesia or participating in a program. Family unity is really at the center of Indonesian culture and their values. So you're expected to place your family and the well-being of your family above anything else in terms of the way you make commitments and who you're loyal to, and really just in your daily life. It's something that I think is present here, but in Indonesia, it's very, very important, and people should know that going in. With that, there's a age hierarchy in terms of the oldest members of a family are going to garner the most respect, and it's important to show those members the most respect. There's a greeting in Indonesia known as the salim, wherein one would take the hand of another person and touch it to their forehead. And while it's not fully expected of all foreigners, and it's not something that you have to do to every single older person, to somebody who is very high on the age hierarchy that garners that respect, it is usually something that most Indonesians will do as a means of showing respect for age. So in addition to that, there's correct titles. Pa and Bu are examples, but there are other ones based on what younger members of the society should call the older members. And then in addition, there's correct ways to address people that are doing services, all by means of showing respect. Going along with respect and values, the concept of saving face, which isn't as present in the US, is definitely a force in Indonesian values. And what that basically means is that it's not as respectful to single somebody out, whether they're doing something negative or something that's positive, because you should be looking towards the interest of it as a group. I think it goes back a little bit more to the whole unity of a family, but in a way, the entire country is supposed to be united. So it's important that when people are in groups, they're looking for the good of the group rather than self-interest. So that translates into language, and something that I think is a little surprising for most English speakers is that a lot of the requests or answers for chores or tasks are passive. So the subject could be, has the door been closed, instead of have you closed the door. It's a different way to ask, and it might seem a little indirect here, but it's considered polite there. I don't think it's necessarily something that all Indonesians expect foreigners to have understood, and I think they're very cognizant of that. But it's something that you should be made aware of if you have interest in going to Indonesia. And along with that is the influence of Islam on culture. It tends to be a little more conservative in the way people dress. They speak of things in certain contexts inside and outside the home. So that's their sort of the values aspect of Indonesian culture. And we'll go on a little more to other aspects that define the culture of Indonesia.
So the next aspect of culture we're talking about is going to be the arts. So since we talked about how many different islands and how diverse the country is, you can tell that there are like many different ways that art is embodied in this country. There are over 300 separate ethnicities that each have their own like regional customs, and that comes with like having their own artistic styles. The religions also influence the art. So we talked about how like Indonesia is very Muslim, but there are also a lot of different religions depending on which area you go to. And that also goes into like the regional customs, and in turn influences the art, such as the architecture, which can be seen, like we have an example here, the temples in Java versus like Bali. And then batik, which there's an example. We actually got to make our own batik, and it was super cool. Batik is print. We're all wearing it today, actually. Like, show off your batik, guys. And it really is like the pride of Indonesia. There's like National Batik Day, and it's handmade with wax, and then like you dye it, but then you get rid of the wax later. So like the print comes out, and that's really cool. To continue going off about the arts for a little bit, my host family was actually very into the arts. So when we're going to talk later about like excursions with our family, when I went on the excursion with my host family, we would usually go to like museums, and then like they took me to a ballet that was like traditional Indonesian, which was really cool to see. They also took me to like a traditional angklung show, which is like an instrument there. So like they have a lot of emphasis on the arts, especially because it shows the diversity of the country. And I think that's good.
Okay, so on religion, which is a major aspect of life in Indonesia, so it's on the ID card, and a lot of people are very dedicated to their religion. So Indonesia is majority Muslim, 87.2%, but they are tolerant of other beliefs. So my host family was actually Christian. My host dad was the youth pastor at the church. So I went to church every Sunday where I helped out with childcare. As you can see, that's one of the classes that I helped out in. But then I also went to the youth service, and sometimes I went to church with my host family. So this was a really big part of my NSLI experience, and I'm really grateful that I was able to meet the congregation, and that was a place where I could practice Indonesian, just like introducing myself to other people, but then where I could also still practice my religion. So I am Christian, and my host family, they were like, if you want to come, you can. That's just a part of what we do. So yeah, like for example, my host family, once a month, they had like the whole congregation come to the house, and they would just have a big celebration where people would be singing and there would be a lot of food. So that ended up being a really positive aspect of my life in Indonesia, and it really is a big part. And then we also went to, this was just on our own, we ended up going to the mosque in Indonesia. And in the picture there, you can see how, in the same picture that you can see the mosque, you can also see the cathedral, which is the smaller building in the background. So yeah, even though Indonesia is majority Muslim, not everyone is a Muslim. So it shows the diversity of the country, as we were talking about earlier. So, and then there's also like the Hindu temples in Bali, which is bigger there. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about Indonesian sports and activities. So soccer is definitely the most popular sport, and the picture on the left shows one of the parties that I had with my host family, where everyone in town got together to watch the World Cup. And then the center picture actually shows me and my host family at Car Free Day, which is an event that several Indonesians will participate in, where all of the major roads are closed so that people can bike and they can walk and they can run, which are not normal activities that you can do in Jakarta during the weekdays. And then again, like the other picture just shows one of my host brother's soccer matches that I went to watch. Sports are very important to Indonesians, and they love to play sports to pass time. Yeah, so it's a big part of the culture.
So to continue on with like the cultural activities that I was mentioning earlier, with like NSLI, we did many cultural activities. So like some of them were community service, where we would usually have community service about once a week. We did a lot where we would like visit kids. We visited older people too. I also mentioned earlier how one of our cultural activities was making batik by ourselves. Like traditionally, we sat on the floor, we used the wax. We tried not to burn ourselves with the wax. Also, we had dance lessons towards the end, which we actually performed a traditional Indonesian dance that was Betawi, which is like from the area of Jakarta. At the farewell party, it was like a surprise for our parents and for our teachers and for everyone who was really there. It was a lot of fun to learn, but it was like one of our activities that we did, I think, once or twice a week towards the end. Another example of our activities, which we did with our teachers, we went to a traditional market and then we practiced our bargaining skills. So we practiced like actually using the language on this activity. And then we went to several embassy visits, which were really cool, just to like learn about America and how America is viewed in different cultures. And we also learned about like safety. It was more for like our orientation. And our big cultural excursions, like we went to museums, went to Taman Mini, Indonesia, which is, speaking of the diversity from earlier, it's a theme park that kind of has like a region for every part of Indonesia and like shows you their architecture, it shows you their art styles. Sometimes there are events where there's like dancing and singing from that region. And it's really like a cool way to see all of Indonesia without having to leave Jakarta. Pulau Seribu was really cool. It was one of our longer trips. We went for the weekend, and Pulau means like island and Seribu means 1,000. So we went to like the 1,000 islands. It's like off of Jakarta. We went to Pulau Tidung, which is the name of the island. And we had so much fun there. It was like a really nice weekend. We talked to the locals. You can see in the picture in the bottom right, if I'm not mistaken. We got to talk with a bunch of like high school kids that were our age. And it was really like the whole interaction was just so much fun. There were a lot more cultural activities. Like we got to visit Google. Yeah, there were a lot that were just very interesting. And these were all like with the NSLI group, because there were some that we did personally, like personally after school, if we had nothing planned, sometimes we would just like go to the mall or like maybe go to a cafe or something. But these ones mentioned here are all with NSLI. So I'm also going to be speaking about our host families. So host families are matched to like the NSLI participants through like what you put on your application and what they put on their application. And I think that AFS did a really good job of matching us, because personally, like I love my family. I still talk to them. Like we have a WhatsApp group chat. I think a lot of the other participants can relate to that. So usually the families, like they provide you 3 meals a day. Usually during the week you're at school for most of that. So, and it's not like they gave me dinner for me personally, but that's all I really needed, and breakfast. They gave me a room. I got my own room, which is really cool. I know a lot of us, I think, got our own rooms. They provided transportation to the language school, which for a lot of us was kind of far away. For me, it was about like an hour every day, which is just, it's just Jakarta traffic. You get used to it. You just wake up early in the morning. You either take like a taxi. Sometimes I took a Gojek, which is like a motorcycle that's like kind of like Uber. But usually my host dad would just like drop me off on his way to work. And then the host families also took us on like our own culture excursions, which was really just what they were doing on the weekend, or like sometimes during the middle of the week, like my host family would be like, oh, we're going grocery shopping. Like, do you want to come with us? And I'd be like, yeah, like I want to see what you guys have in your grocery stores. And then on the weekends, like a lot of the excursions could be like more like mini vacations, I guess. Like I went to Bandung twice, which is where my host family is actually from. It's about like a 2 to 3 hour car ride without traffic from Jakarta. There was a weekend where we went to Yogyakarta, which was an 8-hour train ride, but then on the way back, we took an airplane. And then a lot of us, I know some of us went to Bali, some of us went to Solo. Yeah, it was really just like dependent on your host family. And every host family is very different. Personally, for me, my host family had 2 young daughters, which was really cool because like I only have an older brother like at home. So that was cool just to see. You can see Sam's host family up there. And then the bottom picture is the first day we actually met our host families, because after like in-country orientation, which was really short, actually it was less than a day. So that's like everyone. I got to meet my host family's extended family several times. They were actually planning a wedding while I was there. So like I got to be involved in the process of like picking out dresses and picking out like the food and like seeing all that. Sadly, I didn't actually get to attend the wedding because it was after I left. But my host mom like sent us pictures. And then like she said that her family was like, oh, like they missed you there. And I was like, it was so cute. But continuing off of host families, all of the families are going to be different per person. They have varying English knowledge, financial status, and family structure. So some families are fairly young. Some families were like had children that were in college. We all experienced kind of like varying ends. Some of us lived in a little bit of luxury. Others of us like really experienced Indonesia. But it was really cool. And I don't think any of us really had like a terrible experience with our host families. As I go back to saying again, like the program is very good at matching host families with the participants.
Okay, so on to food. So as Amina was saying, the host families are very nice and accommodating. So I am a vegetarian, and my host family always made sure that I had food to eat. So Indonesian food, rice is served with every meal. I definitely had rice 3 times a day. Goreng or fried food is very common. As you can see in the picture in the bottom middle is fried tofu that I had in Bandung when I took a trip with my host family, and vegetarian and vegan options are definitely available. So in the picture that has the 3 dishes and then some more fried tofu, most of all of that other than the middle plate is vegan, and it was very easy to be a vegetarian. I would say it was probably easier to be a vegetarian in Indonesia than in the US. And then food does vary depending on where your host family is from. So my host family was actually from North Sulawesi. So as you can see at the top middle picture, it's a picture of bubur jagung, which is from Sulawesi. My host family owned a restaurant, so sometimes I would eat there with them. And then what else? Yeah, there's also satay, which is grilled meat, and then KFC is really popular in Indonesia. Surprisingly, they really like fried chicken, and then fish is pretty common. But it's really, if you're afraid of applying just to Indonesia because you're a vegetarian, I would not worry about it. There's tofu and tempeh, which is like it's fermented soybeans that's kind of like tofu, but it has more texture. So I had tofu or tempeh with most meals, and it was really good. Indonesian food is something that I miss most about Indonesia, really. They have some of the best food, and then like even just like nasi goreng, which is fried rice. So Indonesian fried rice is slightly different than like than the fried rice that you might get at like your local Chinese restaurant. Spices are also pretty common in Indonesian food. They have sambal, which is the spicy sauce, and then they also have ketchup manis, which is sweet soy sauce that they put on a lot of foods. So yeah, one other food that isn't pictured there, they do have sweets. So martabak is like a pancake that has sweetened condensed milk and chocolate on it, and it's really good, and it's fried, and like some of the best martabak is in Bandung, and I was actually able to try it when I went there with my host family. So yeah, it's really good.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the language of Indonesia, which is called Bahasa Indonesia, which literally means language of Indonesia. So Bahasa Indonesia was our target language with NSLI, but there are 300 plus local languages in Indonesia, which basically means that every island in Indonesia has its own language. So even though my host family lived in Jakarta, they were from Solo, which is still on Java, but they speak Javanese instead of Bahasa Indonesia. So I had a lot of experience with Javanese as well as Bahasa Indonesia. And because of that, many people speak multiple languages. So they'll speak their local language, which is their first language, and then they're bilingual with Bahasa Indonesia, and they can speak those to like the same degree. And then oftentimes they'll add a third language, which is most commonly English, but they also speak Arabic as well. So at the bottom, we just have like some common phrases that are in Indonesian. So if you went on this program, you would learn what they mean. Yeah, it's a great language. Okay, so to learn Indonesia, we went to IALF, which was our language school. We had a total of 120 classroom hours of learning the language. So 4 hours of instruction were taught every day, and we would also have a 30-minute coffee or tea break. And we also had 5 teachers, they're pictured below with me, and it was a rotating schedule. So we'd have 2 teachers a day, and they would focus on different skills. So these slides are just some pictures from our classroom. One of the most common ways that we would learn language was by acting out skits in Indonesian, and this gave us an opportunity to practice real world language instead of just learning it textbook style. So those pictures were in skits, and then we also learned traditional dances, and we participated in cultural activities to advance our language. So again, it's not just writing down and sitting at desks, you're actively engaging with the language and communicating with it to learn it to a further extent. Okay, so these are some of what we would do after school. So as Amina kind of mentioned before, after school, if we didn't have a cultural activity, we would have free time. So that time could either be spent with the host family, or you could go with your friends from school to the mall or to a mosque or wherever you wanted within reason in the city. So on the weekend, we would travel with our host families. So I traveled a lot with my host family, and I have some pictures below. So the center picture is me with a group of friends that I met in Kota Tua, which is Old City, which is in northern Jakarta. That's actually where the Dutch lived when they inhabited Indonesia. And the right picture is me and my host sister in Bandung, and we're at a crater. And then the left picture is me and then some of the other NSLI students when we went to visit Monas, which is Museum Nasional. And we're pictured with an Indonesian military officer. So as you can see, like in these pictures, we traveled lots of different places, and we really did learn a lot about Indonesia and their points of pride in the country.
All right, so memories and takeaways. So first off is language progression. Obviously, there's a whole lot of memories and takeaways from the host families, and I'll get to that, but NSLI-Y at its core is a language program, and I really think it's amazing the result that you come out with. In terms of 3 months, you can't necessarily expect a complete fluency, but I think every one of us was proficient enough to, live a daily life in Indonesia. I know I was kind of scared to like get out of the house the first week or so because there are a lot of people and it's super loud and it's a city, and like the way people drive, it's just like everything is coming at you at once. And then by the last few days, you don't want to leave because it's Jakarta and it's amazing. Basically, the progress you make, it really shows, and you can have conversations with people you just meet. So the language progression and the way NSLI-Y conducts the program is really evident. Something else that I think is a pretty major takeaway is development of independence. I know 6 weeks was the longest time I've ever been away from my family. And I know for me, it was hard for my parents, even more than it was for me, to just let their child go to a foreign country that they don't really know much about. But what it did for me was definitely invaluable, because I felt like I developed a greater sense of identity for myself and what I care about there, as well as a greater self-confidence in my ability to function as a member of society in general. There are things where you'll have to do something and you won't necessarily have your parents to fall back on. Now, that said, NSLI-Y has a great support system, and you can't always go to them for anything you need, really. But I think in terms of like little stuff in your daily life, it's really amazing how you'll develop those skills over the course of 6 weeks, which is basically a month and a half, or I guess it is a month and a half. But also lasting connection with the host families. I talked to my host family 2 days ago. Like, to me, that's the most enriching part of the entire experience. My host family was relatively young, and they have you can actually see in this picture, this is like my favorite picture. This is their daughter, Kiva, and my host parents were relatively young for the program, but the way I bonded with them, and especially with their daughter, it's something that I think I'm going to try and contact them for the rest of their life. The 2 days ago, I learned that she went on her first field trip to the zoo, and she like loved all the animals. It was kind of an amazing moment in my life to realize that, literally around the world, there's somebody that like is having their own life and desires and joy, and it's all developing, and it's just a really, really amazing feeling. If you guys want to add anything in, though, because I know I think the memories and the takeaways are something that are going to be individualized, and for me, a lot of the memories and the takeaways have to do with my host family. So I know for you guys, it's going to be a little different, but certainly the memories and the takeaways, I think, are the most important part of any NSLI-Y program.
I would definitely second that. My host family and I are very close. It was my host mom's birthday recently, and I was able to tell her happy birthday. And it's truly, I would say that's probably the hardest part about NSLI is actually just like leaving your host family, because like you don't think that you're going to get as close to them as you really do. So it was just, yeah, I'm so grateful for them and like being able to truly experience Indonesia.
So one of my takeaways was the independence and confidence that I gained from this program. So going into NSLI, I had never spent an extended time away from my family, like for 6 weeks, like that's a long time. But I learned that I can function by myself independently, and I can live in a foreign country speaking a different language and be successful at it. So I think that's really amazing about NSLI.
Going off of what Megan said, sorry, I feel the same way. The independence, I didn't really think about it until I came back here, but I really had a lot of independence, and I didn't expect to be able to like do things the way I did. Like I took the train by myself. I mentioned Gojek earlier. So you need to message the the motorcycle driver like by text message to be like, oh, this is where I am. This is like what I look like. But they message in a really shorthand form of Indonesian, which we definitely did not learn in class. So just the independence gained from like being able to communicate with different people, I think was really my main takeaway. I also love my host family too, though. Like, I could talk about them for hours.
All right. So some advice for future students. So try things that seem unfamiliar to you. This one is by far the most important, to me at least. The way you'll be thrown into something that, at least for me, was completely foreign, and the way to experience that and to get the most out of it is to just say yes. There's a lot of things that I don't think I necessarily would have done in the US that, I was more willing to in Indonesia. And it was because I was purposely trying to throw myself into the culture. And in addition to you doing that and you getting more out of that, I think people will respond to the fact that you're trying to learn about it. I know, like, this is kind of a weird example, but food was a big one for my host family, because I had just said, oh, well, I'd love to try like all the food. And what ended up happening is my host family kind of took it upon themselves to just expose me to all these different Indonesian foods. And I get like, it ends up that you try things that chicken lung is solid. Like you end up trying things that you don't think you would have tried before. And even when you have something that you learn is different, and with the food thing, I guess that example is horse hoof. Horse hoof was an interesting time for me. It's just like, it's an amazing thing to just know that you did that and you really were a part of this culture. You were trying to totally like immerse yourself, because the program can only take you so far in terms of the language. The cultural aspect of it is going to be how much you put in. So whether that's taking a Gojek and getting driven to a mall by a 70-year-old guy like on a motorcycle and being like, wow, this is like not something that would happen in the US, to like just, I don't know, trying dragon fruit, putting things that you don't see in front of you at home in front of you in a foreign country is really the most important thing to make sure you get the most out of this program, in addition to all the language stuff.
Yeah, just to go off of what Sam said, definitely try new things. I know I don't love pineapple in America and I try to avoid it, but my host family, they gave me pineapple and I tried it, and like Indonesian like fruit specifically is just so good, and it was like I didn't expect myself to like it, but like I've never liked pineapple, and then I ate like a ton of pineapple that day. And yeah, so try new things. And then also like I don't like avocados, but I tried avocado juice and it ended up being really good. And then one more thing, so with your host family, really try and connect to them, talk to them, even if like you can't always use Indonesian to talk to them, ask them about in English if you have to, just really try and get to know your host family. And something that my host family did was that my host said the first night, he was like, you're going to learn 10 words per day. And every day he would be like, what are your 10 words, Aurel? And it was just, for me, that was something that was really helpful. And I'm really grateful that my host dad did. So.
Okay, so to finish the slide, we recommend using Bahasa Indonesia whenever possible, but like Aurelia said, like if you need to speak in English like the first couple of weeks, that's great to form connections with your host family. Additionally, something that was hard for us as being the first NSLI summer program for Indonesia is that we didn't know what to pack and what clothes were acceptable to wear in Indonesia. So just regular clothes are fine as long as you're not wearing shorts and as long as your sleeves are at least the length of a regular t-shirt, you'll be okay. And then also we strongly recommend packing host family gifts, which are just like little tokens from your home state, what represents you and things that you want your host family to learn about your culture. And then I think one of the questions is actually, what was the most surprising thing that you found out about Indonesia? And mine was that people wanted to take pictures with you. So because we don't look like regular Indonesians, or at least I don't, I would just be stopped randomly on the street and people would ask if they could take a picture with me because culturally that's acceptable. They actually have a word specifically for white foreigners, which is bule. And whenever I went anywhere in Indonesia, I could hear that word and I could hear people who wanted to take a picture of me. I could see people discreetly taking pictures of me. Yeah, I kind of felt like a celebrity almost. But that was very interesting. And I actually liked it because although I'm very introverted and I don't really open up to strangers in America, I was grateful for the opportunity to be able to share about my culture and my experiences with these Indonesians with something as simple as a picture. So I think now we're going to try to open it up to questions. So we'll try to answer some of your questions that you leave in the question box, or if you type them in. So yeah, it's up to you guys. And terima kasih, or thank you for listening to our presentation.
Okay, the question is some of you already mentioned the way that the program helped you gain confidence and independence. Is there anything else that you learned about yourself? So one thing that I learned about myself was that you can learn so much in such a short amount of time. Like my Indonesian, it started at like basic. I could say like hello and like Namasaya, which is just my name is, and I didn't think that you could learn that much in 6 weeks. And then just about myself, I learned that I can challenge myself more to just be more open and try new stuff.
For me, something that I think is relatively unexpected that happens as a result is you learn things about yourself that you don't ever really go into the program thinking that you will. For me, it was how much like I enjoy just having fun with children. So I didn't know I was going to get paired up with a 17-month-old as my host sister. It just kind of happened that way. And I have 2 siblings at home that I take care of, and I love them. But I didn't know how it was going to be because she's so young. A lot of the other participants in this program have people that are around their age. But anyway, what was interesting was while she was learning Indonesian just as like an infant learns a language, I was trying to learn it too. And it ended up being that the way we communicated was just like very basic, and it kind of developed in the same type of means. And then in addition to that, it just kind of gave me like a sense of humanity in terms of like children are all kind of the same. Like they all have a certain set of things that they like and stuff that makes them happy that's inherent to all human beings. And I think in addition to that, there were a lot of community events that we did with children where we went to a house for childhood cancer where they had allowed patients to live there, where it was right near the hospital, and to the Red Nose Foundation, which is an amazing organization in North Jakarta. It helps underprivileged kids there. And that was by far, in addition to my host family, those events were my favorite events, just because the energy of like children and what they do, and what makes them happy is just something that really like I really resonate with. So for me now, I'm studying, and ideally I want to be a pediatrician, but it actually helped me get a job here. My work study job in college is at a child daycare center. So that was never something I would have considered before, but because of the experience and the place that it put me in, that again, I didn't expect to be in, I learned something about myself. And I think it's pretty common for people to learn things they didn't expect to. Yeah, long answer. Sorry about that. An attendee asked a question in the Q&A box about being vegan in Indonesia. Aurelia, would you like to take this question?
Okay, yeah, I talked about it a little bit in the food portion, but yeah, you can definitely be vegan in Indonesia. It might be a little bit harder than being vegetarian, but one of the presenters that was at our pre-departure orientation, which you go to first, David was actually, he told us that he told me that he had been vegan for like the last 6 months of his program. So with like tempeh and tofu, you're definitely, it might be kind of the same sometimes, but there's so much fruit that you can also try that will supplement that you'll be fine. So yeah. Oh, and then Iron asked, what are your future plans? You said of your study of Indonesian. I'm a junior in high school right now, and I'm definitely looking at colleges that have Indonesian programs where I can continue to study it in college. And I'm trying to do some self-study, well, until then,
So I hope to continue learning Indonesian. First off, I'm doing a lot of independent studying. I try to talk to myself every day using Indonesian, just going through what I remember so I can stay at the level where I'm at right now. And I really hope to continue being involved in international relations with college and beyond. So I'm definitely looking into more programs like NSLI. I'm hoping to do the Peace Corps after I graduate college, and they have Peace Corps Indonesia. So yeah, I think for me, like definitely one of my priorities is to continue learning Indonesian and to continue to be involved in Indonesia as a country.
Good. So for me, since I'm in college now, Northeastern has a lot of Indonesian clubs, which is I found very surprising. So I'm part of the Indonesian Student Association. They were kind of confused. They were like, "You're not Indonesian," but then I explained it, and they were like, "Oh, good enough. You can speak Indonesian like more than some of our other members." I'm trying to do the critical language scholarship, which is similar to NSLI, where it's like language learning scholarship over the summer, and it's only available to college students. So I'm actually in the process of applying for that now. And then, like Megan said, I'm also self-studying, which kind of gets hard, especially being a freshman in college and you have a lot to do. But the dorm I live in is like very international. So I also found like some international Indonesian students, and I like talked to them. And the first day I talked to like this girl, I was like, "Oh, you're Indonesian," and then I was like, "Oh, like Nama saya Mira." And she was so confused, but like now we're actually like pretty close friends. I think that's mostly it. Oh, to go off of that, actually, there's also like Permias, Massachusetts, which is like another group of like Indonesian college students, and there's one for every state, I'm pretty sure. And actually, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, they hosted New England IndoFest in Boston, which was really cool because I got to go. Like, I didn't get to host it since I'm like a newer member, but I got to go. They had Indonesian food. It was great. They had Indonesian dancing. But yeah, there's stuff to do.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention is that you get really close to the other American students on your program. So I know that I've phoned up a few friends recently and just started conversing in Indonesian with them so that we can all continue to learn together and not forget our Indonesian.
Yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention is that I'm planning on applying to YES, and Indonesia is one of the options. So there's a possibility that I could go do that. And I know I've talked to Megan about just practicing with her too. So, yeah.
I know at my school, we don't have like, should I be like doing a thing with the screen to get it to be, okay. I know at my school, we don't really have necessarily like an Indonesian club. And what I've found is that there are like people that I hear snippets like speaking Indonesian, and then I've like found Indonesian people here, and it's pretty amazing because they never think that I will speak Indonesian. But anyway, that's pretty amazing in and of itself because it's allowed me to make friends with a bunch of people that I wouldn't make friends with. And I'm looking in terms of future Indonesian to my school offers this thing where if you can find a certain internship program, they'll fund it. So I'm looking to, I just emailed the Indonesia correspondent for the New York Times, and we'll see if he gets back to me about a journalism internship. But there's also a couple other ones that I'm looking at. So we'll see if those pan out. But I think what's important is after this program, I think most people are looking to, if not all of them, are looking to continue their Indonesian language experience.
Okay, so to answer some more of our questions, Delaney from Facebook said that she thought our program was cool, but that she wouldn't be able to afford it. And I'd just like to remind everyone that NSLI-Y is a fully funded scholarship. I paid nothing to go to Indonesia. And in fact, you got a stipend to cover some of the basic living costs there. So everyone can afford it if you're able to get accepted into the program. And if you're really excited for going to Indonesia and you're inspired, then I'm sure that you'll be accepted. So another question was, how difficult was it for you to assimilate into the culture? And for me, it was a little bit difficult, but nothing I couldn't handle. So it was the first time that I had to live in a different country for a long time, as I'm sure for everyone else. And just like little changes will be different. It's not really like a big thing that's noticeable, but it's just like smaller things about your everyday life that are different between countries. And actually, when I came back to America, I had reverse culture shock where I was thinking of things in Indonesia and I was comparing American life to Indonesia. And I think that actually was harder for me than the beginning culture shock. culture shock from going to Indonesia.
Okay, Vini is asking what qualifications do you need to be accepted in the program. So they really focus on like why you want to, like having a true interest for learning the language and like how you might use it in the future. And also just being an overall flexible person. You don't need to have studied abroad before or to be accepted into NSLI. I had only ever been to like Canada, which is relatively close. So yeah, and then one other question is, why did we choose Indonesia? So I'll start. So I chose Indonesian. So my grandpa was actually born in Bandung. I was able to go to the house that he had grown up in, and I visited there with my host family. And also because so I already speak Chinese just because I learned that when I was a kid, and I really wanted to. I want to work in Southeast Asia at some point, and Indonesia will be really useful for future career goals. So since I also want to be a foreign service officer.
For me, my reasons are a lot less like deep. Indonesia actually uses the Roman alphabet and the other languages that the NSLI-Y program offers, they don't. So I think in terms of language process, it's a lot easier to learn a high quality like amount of Indonesian versus say Mandarin, because you have to go through the entire alphabet as well. And I know some of the programs will do that beforehand, but I've heard from other participants that it's just more material versus if you already have the basis with the Roman alphabet, it's a little easier. And then in addition to that, another not smart reason, I have heard that I have an Indonesian friend and they're super nice. And basically what they said to me is the fruit is amazing. Go for the fruit. And I did. That was another really big influencing factor, the fruit. And it's still like, I'm so glad that I made a decision based off the fruit because it was amazing. So yeah, the Roman alphabet, which allows for a better language learning experience, and the fruit, which tastes awesome. It lived up to the hype.
So I'm going to talk about like more why I chose Indonesian. I don't really think I had that many qualifications except for just being very passionate. So I chose it also because one of my closest friends is Indonesian, and I kind of saw snippets of the culture when I would visit her house, like through her family. Like her mom would cook traditional Indonesian foods occasionally, and I really just wanted to learn a lot more about it. So kind of like Sam, I didn't really have that many deep reasons to learn Indonesian, but I'm glad that I did choose Indonesian.
So I chose Indonesian because I knew the least about Indonesia as a country. And I'm very interested in learning about different places and different cultures, different countries. And I heard that they added Indonesia to NSLI's program. And I was like, wait, where's Indonesia? What is Indonesia? And after doing some research, I learned about how diverse Indonesia is as a country and about how easy the language is to learn. And I realized that if I wanted to learn about a different culture, I should learn about one that I don't know that well and one that I wouldn't be able to have an opportunity to learn about in my everyday life.
Is this for me about the fruit? Did I mention the fruit in my essay? No, I didn't. I talked a little more about the Roman alphabet than I talked about the fruit, but something that I think that is like pretty important to the program is that you are creative with it. The way I wrote my essay, it was about an experience in my life, and more than like an answer to an open-ended question on a test, I like kind of tried to make it a narrative. And I think the way that NSLI-Y is looking at these applications, they're looking for a human being, not just like a resume, because you have to live with a family and you actually need to make a connection with them. So I would say definitely in your essays, make sure you don't forget to humanize yourself. And like, I don't think fruit would honestly be a bad topic to write about.
Yeah, going off of what you said, honestly, just try to sound passionate about the program and explain your reasons fully as to why you want to participate. And if you sound enthusiastic and if you sound like a motivated kid, then I'm sure that they'll be able to see that through your essays. So if you're very passionate about fruit, feel free to write it in your essays. If you're passionate about something else and it connects to Indonesia and Nestle, write about it, because they want to know more about you and how their program will help you.
Yeah, I mean, there's no cookie cutter Nestle student. We're all very different. And I think that's part of what made the program so great, is that we weren't all the same, and that it was truly like people from all over that were able to get together and like just learn Indonesian. So don't be afraid if you don't feel like you fit the cookie cutter Nestle student.
Okay.
Do you want to take it, Amina?
Yeah. So we can wrap up after the next question if there are no more, but just wanted to remind everyone that the NSLI application deadline is October 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is very close. So just quick reminder. Yeah. So for the last question, unless like someone else has any questions, like please put them there now so we can answer all your questions. Did you guys speak Indonesian before applying to the program? I had an Indonesian friend who taught me how to say nama saya, and that was it. Yep, no Indonesian.
Yeah, I self-studied the language when I applied to Nestle so that I would have some background experience before being in the country. And I got to, you just take an OPI if you self-study and you acknowledge that on your application. And I was a novice mid at the start of the program, or beginner mid, I think. And then I was able to get to intermediate mid by the end. So I still showed a lot of growth, and it was definitely like I made so much more progress in the 6 weeks that I was in country than in the 6 months that I had tried to study it on my own. But I know for some of the other programs, schools offer it, or people take programs to learn it, like the languages, but none of us in our program had any prior experience, like classroom experience with Indonesian.
Mm-hmm. For me, I knew how to count to 10, and I knew that you could say "Selamat pagi" for like good morning, basically, or like how are you. And I found out that pronunciation and like the way that I was saying it, which is how I just said it now, is like people just say "mat pagi" to each other. For me specifically, I did a bunch of exercises that they provided beforehand, and I found that I came in and I didn't know anything, and it was totally fine. Like, you come in and you definitely have a limited knowledge, but because it's an immersion program and you hear people say things all around you, there's going to be stuff that you pick up in certain situations that a classroom setting just isn't going to give you.
Yeah, I could count to 10, and I knew some little greetings because like that's where my grandpa's from, and like my tante Carol is still alive and she speaks Indonesian, but it's like from a long time ago. But yeah, I had a lot of language growth, and then because my host family was really intent on me learning Indonesian, I had a lot of language growth there, even if it wasn't learning in class. Everyone at church was more than happy to like correct my pronunciation or help me with that, even the little kids. So yeah, don't be afraid to apply if you haven't done that. So do we just want to say terima kasih? Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming.